Hi, Mark Granis here with Lecture 3.1, Substance, Accidents, and the 10 Categories. This corresponds to Section 3.1 or 3-1 of our text, The Reasonable Person. Let's begin with our agenda for today. We'll do a brief recap of Chapters 1 and 2. Then I'll introduce the 10 categories, which we'll be dealing with in the first half of this chapter. I'll go over the substance-accident distinction, and then we'll talk about 3 limitations on the 10 categories. All right, in previous episodes, that is, in the first 2 chapters, we've learned that logic is a tool for gaining knowledge. Knowledge of what? Knowledge of the truth. The truth about what? The truth about reality, all of the world around us. We've studied 3 acts of the mind, and the first act of the mind is simple apprehension. What does that do for us? Well, simple apprehension is what produces the concepts that we use to make sense of the world around us. We communicate our concepts using terms, and we always strive to communicate those terms with clarity so that we choose a term which produces exactly the right idea in the mind of the person to whom we want to communicate. That's sort of how far we've got so far. But there's a problem. When we engage in this simple apprehension, don't we usually apprehend more than one concept at a time? That is, as I sit here in this room, I look around me and I apprehend a desk and a clock and a light and a bookshelf and a lectern and all kinds of things. And I sort of apprehend all these things at once. How do I sort all of these things out? Well, that's really the subject of what we're going to do now in Chapter 3. The title, Knowing What We're Talking About, gives it away. We're trying to know all of the things that we perceive in the world down to their core, to really, really know them down in terms of their essence. We'll sort them 2 ways, in terms of their intention and in terms of their extension. And the intention is what the 10 categories are all about, and we'll start with that today. And the extension is what the 5 predicables are all about, and we'll do those in a few lectures from now. So let's get started with intention and the 10 categories. We've seen before the definition of intention. It is the maximally expressed sum of the elements of meaning, sometimes called notes, comprised by a concept. Well, the thing is, we have many concepts in our head and many notes for most concepts. I could not possibly go through all of the concepts in my head, let alone all of the notes for all of those concepts. And then you have different concepts in your head, and all of those have all kinds of notes. So to understand just how big a job that is to understand the boldness of Aristotle's claim that all of the notes of all of the concepts in all of our heads fall into just 10 categories. And that is his definition, or our definition for the 10 categories, the 10 most fundamental kinds of notes that can be within the intention of any universal concept. Kinds of notes. Not that there are only 10 notes, but that all of the notes that you can say about something, it's black, it's round, it's heavy, it is larger than a bread box, it's smaller than a Ford F-150. All of these things, these are all kinds of notes. They can sort them into just 10 boxes. And that claim has held up pretty well over the last 2,500 years. Now, there's one great big dichotomy running through the 10 categories, and then one smaller dichotomy. The great big one is between substance, which is one of the 10 categories, and accidents, which are 9 of the 10 categories. Then the accidents are further subdivided so that the intrinsic accidents are 3 of the 9 accidental categories, and the extrinsic accidents are 6 of the 9 accidental categories. Just to eliminate the suspense, let's put them all up here. The fundamental distinction is between substance on the left and the accidents on the right. And then within the accidents, the 3 in the upper echelon are the intrinsic accidents, quantity, quality, and relation. And then we learn the other 6 in pairs, and you'll see in a couple of lectures, action and passion, time and place, and posture and possession. So for today, let's just go to the substance and accident distinction and talk mostly about that. Substance is that which, by its nature, exists in itself and not in some other thing. By contrast, accident is that which, by its nature, typically exists in some other thing. Now, this is the grooviest chapter of the entire year, and so that part may sound particularly groovy. So let me just try and give a couple of examples that will unpack that a little bit. With two black chairs, the chair stands under the two-ness and the blackness, right? So in other words, think of the chair as a platform for the two-ness and the blackness. I can't perceive two-ness unless there are two somethings. I can't perceive a black something unless there is something to be black. So every accident needs substance in order for us to understand what the accident is, for it to really come into existence. And I didn't go to a fancy school, so I didn't learn Latin when I was a kid. But even I know that there's a connection between what stands under and the word substance. Chairness is the substance in which the two-ness and the blackness of the two black chairs also exist as accidents. Two black chairs. The chairs are the substance. The two and the black are both accidents. So are we saying that substance is just any noun and that accidents are any adjective or maybe any modifier? No, that's not really it. It's not a bad analogy. There is an analogy here to nouns and adjectives, because when adjectives modify the noun, there is a sense in which the adjective needs the noun in order to come into existence. But it's only an analogy. There are nouns that can be accidents. For example, think about a wink or a smile. Well, those are nouns, but could you have a wink without an eye? You really couldn't. Could you have a smile without a mouth? You really couldn't. A wink and a smile, I think we see as basically, at least most of the time, a certain posture of the substance of the eye or the mouth or something like that. Well, if we say that all these things have substance, do we mean that that they exist materially? Does anything with substance have material? Again, no. Love and justice are substances. They exist. They have existence, and whatever exists has substance. Even unicorns and dragons have substance. Well, how's that exactly? They don't exist. How could they have substance? Well, there's a distinction that helps us there. We distinguish between primary substances, which exist in the world, and secondary substances, which exist only in thought, like unicorns and dragons. They exist only as ideas. All right, well, that's the basics of the substance and accident distinction. Let's talk about 3 limitations on the 10 categories that we should just get out of the way up front. First, only universals have a category. What are universals again? A universal is that which extends to many things by virtue of something that they all have in common. So man, which is a universal, has a category, but not Socrates. Socrates can't have a category. He's just a particular. All right. Only simple concepts have a category. So here we mean simple as opposed to complex. Anytime that we've got more than one thing going on, then we might at least be dealing with 2 different categories. And so we only sort things when we have them down to their simplest form. So for example, tea has a category, but not green tea. Third, only finite concepts have a category. So for example, not God, or truth, or beauty. And we'll say more about this limitation to the finite in chapter 4. But for now, let's just get it out there so that we know not to worry about infinite things and fitting them into the 10 categories for now. That's it for now. I will see you next time for lecture 3.2.